I'm Dane Rose, and what I'd like to explore in this journey is a study of patterns. Now, when I was young, and I recommend this because it's an interesting thing to learn, I read a book called The Studies of Cycles by Dewey. And what he points out is that if you study just about any phenomena, that there's a rhythm. There's an in-breath, there's an out-breath, there's a rhythm. In astrology, in astronomy, in the rise and fall of pork bellies on the commodities market, in the long-term debt cycle as illustrated by Peter Thiel and Dalio, there's a cycle to just about everything, and with that cycle comes a pattern. Now, what I'm looking at here is something that's a little bit different than a cycle, but rather a migrating pattern. And the two patterns that I'm looking at is the migration of energy, of formation from cultural power structures, higher cultural power structures to lower cultural power structures, and the holographic nature of the pattern. The fact that within the primary or the core module of culture, you find that the seed value hierarchies, the seed patterns that migrate out into the various cultural expressions. Now, I'm going to look at country and military, the parental structure, the school structure, because a lot of this came to light for me around the Human Awareness Institute facilitator behavior. I'll look at the high power structure, the structure of relationships in Western and more specifically in the United States, and my own structure of values and thoughts and decisions. And while patterns replicate in a variety of topics within these domains, what I want to look at specifically is chauvinism. And as part of the exploration of chauvinism, look at evil. Since it's such a taboo word, I'll just, break it down a little bit to say that when something evolves towards more beauty, truth, goodness, more complexity, more consciousness, when something grows, we're looking at life and living, to grow, to blossom. When you plant an oak tree and it becomes its full expression of itself, that is to live. And while it's a little corny, evil is living spelled backwards. Live evil. Evil is the opposite of life. Evil is the process we experience when we're beginning to blossom, and rather than reaching our full level of complexity and maturity and beauty, we are cannibalized by the environment around us and reduced into a smaller state. The phenomena of trauma by which an adult, a mature adult, is age regressed into a hovering 5-year-old little girl or little boy wondering when they're going to get punished. That phenomena of trauma that we've all experienced at times is a phenomena of going backwards. When our earth environment that's developing is stunted with the chemical load with the toxic load that we place on it, and brought back where fewer and fewer species of plants, forests, where the balance is unsettled. It's a state of regression. Even the traumatic mind itself, the brain inside a human being correlates in some way to the planetary development of, we have what's called a reptilian brain that is 200 million years old, that has fight, flight, freeze connected with it, like our crocodile ancestors, a reptilian brain. And then we move into a limbic brain, a more emotional, instinctual brain. Then we start to be able to learn how to think and be conscious of ourselves, the more human areas of our brain. And then those least explored of all brains and brain patterning within the human species, the transcendent brain. The fact that a human being, through ritual, through dissociation to a certain degree from the known environment, is able to enter a state of transcendence, where we as a human individual remember and move towards a sense of interconnectedness, a sense of oneness, a sense of being a part of something bigger than ourselves. This is the evolutionary cycle within the human body on our planet. And when we traumatize an individual, a child, repeatedly, they never leave the reptilian brain. They stay locked into a sociopathic brain that was designed to survive in a sociopathic environment. And this is really important to understand, that there's a correlation between the outer environment that we live in and the place within the brain's hierarchy that we experience ourselves and identify with. In other words, if you are surrounded by sociopathic people in a sociopathic environment, you will identify primarily with the reptilian brain that was designed 200 million years ago to keep you alive by becoming more sociopathic. In other words, our ability to attune to our environment pairs our most sociopathic programming with environments that are the most sociopathic. And this takes place within a hierarchy of human needs, which Abraham Maslow identified as a theory called the hierarchy of needs. And what he found was that every human being throughout history had a need to survive. And that, as a general rule, would do what was necessary to survive. A child whose parents ask them to steal will steal to survive. A child whose parents ask them to be kind to their brother will do so as much as is necessary to survive. That we fit into a framework in which we take on the shape needed to live and to grow and to keep our bodies alive in the environment that we're in. Many talk about Hollywood as a cutthroat environment. And they learn to be cutthroat in the awareness that generosity does not always pay off in that environment, where there's less than 1% of all the seekers and aspirers that actually get to be a deity in our culture. A deity not through any intrinsic value, but a deity because they are famous. And that huge gap between mattering within a materialistic, fame-based culture and not existing is an extreme that motivates many otherwise empathic and decent human beings to become incredibly manipulative and sociopathic, to make the cut, to get over that point where they survived and the other 99% did not, where they're a star and no one heard of the person that they lied to, that they betrayed, and they're buried. The environment a human being is in plays an enormous role in determining whether we're in cutthroat lizard brain or in a transcendent state of understanding and caring about the interconnected ecology, the ecology of the species, the ecology of the planet, the ecology of ideas of which we are a part. When we live, we gradually climb the human brain stem from cutthroat survival, fight, flight, freeze, to transcendent service, where we bring our gifts to the community in an awareness that by blessing the environment and the ecology of which we are a part, we nourish our own bodies emotionally, mentally, and physically. So we'll touch on evil and life, that dance, that pattern of action, one that leads to living and growth, and the other that leads to turning inward, to de-evolving, to going backward. We'll also look at the framework of health and how that ties in with the framework of symmetry and the framework of ease. Wholeness, health, symmetry, and ease. Now, one of the places that this ends up taking us to is the sphere. The sphere is the most elegant and graceful shape that we know about. It takes less energy to move a sphere than it does to move any other shape on a mathematical level. It's perfectly obvious. Try moving a square around and try moving a ball around. It takes less mass to maintain the integrity of the sphere than it takes to maintain any other shape. Geodesic domes, put forth by Buckminster Fuller as a pioneer in architecture, called Bucky domes, were far more elegant than almost any other shape because they moved in the direction of the sphere. And so, on the one hand, you have symmetry, health, wholeness. And on the other hand, what you have is asymmetry, dis-ease. You have more and more effort. You take a circle and you divide it in half. You take a sphere and you cut it in half. And suddenly the ball doesn't roll. It moves very nice on the one side. It comes up to the point, falls down flat. It takes an enormous amount of energy to get that half up and rolling again. So when you think of living, momentum, and flow, you think of living water, healthy water, the kind of water you find in a bubbling brook, versus the stagnant pools, where algae, etc., is beginning to turn that water toxic. When you think of life, the blood coursing through the body, and then you look at those pockets of diseases, it's when the arteries have gotten clogged and energy can no longer flow. So this is a somewhat intuitive, but also a mathematical principle that when the whole, when the totality of who we are as consciousness, as life, as an ecology, gets divided into parts through the technology of the human ego that separates us from the species that created us. I mean, it's a very interesting phenomena of experience, because without a species, we don't exist as individuals. You have a species that exists because of matter, because of consciousness, because of energy fields, because of the planet, because of the air, because of our families, because of our species. I mean, it's a really fun and interesting exercise to imagine what exists. Like, can you spot anything that exists inside this frame that would exist if other human beings and the planet, etc., didn't exist? You see, there's nothing here that is 100% from me, my ego. And there's nothing there that doesn't exist if the entire ecology of humanity, of energy fields, I mean, you don't exist without gravity. You don't exist without the strong and the weak force. You don't exist without light. You don't exist without warmth. You don't exist without the planet. You don't exist without your parents. You don't exist without your parents' parents, their parents' parents. There's almost nothing that you can claim and say, this is me, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. You get into very high levels of choice, and then the intersection of choice, culture, and influence. Could you make a choice if you didn't have the language to differentiate choice from something else? And where did you get that language of distinction, that technology that allows you to choose? Where did you get it? Does choice exist if language doesn't exist? And does language exist with just one person? You see, I like to think that this is me, right? I'm choosing to make my video in my house with my chalk, with my cameras, and my blackboard, and my necklace, and my clothes, and my body. Sounds good, right? Till you realize I didn't make any of it. I didn't make this body. My parents did. And they didn't make their body. Their parents did. And I didn't make this necklace. Jewelers did. There are stones in this necklace that are 40 to 200 million years old. Crystal. 40 to 200 million years old. And none of you, and none of us, and certainly not me, had anything to do with it. And the polishing, I didn't invent those diamond stones that polish these crystals. I didn't present and develop silver ore. I didn't develop the refining process. I didn't develop petroleum. I didn't figure out how to turn petroleum into a flexible rubber that could be a necklace strand. I didn't develop this style of shaving. I didn't cut this hair. I didn't make this chalk. I don't know how to manufacture a chalkboard. I didn't develop green screen technology. I certainly didn't develop the microchip. And neither did you. We exist in a field, in an ecological dynamic that collapses if the illusion that we hold that this is ours and we have nothing to do with anything else. We don't have to worry about what's going on in the rainforest devastation in Brazil and in other places because that has nothing to do with me. Of course it does. There is not a single thread. You can't even take a piece of chalk and not link it with every single particle and force and dynamic in the known universe. This doesn't exist without that, and our reality certainly doesn't. But we like to look through this lens that says everything inside this bubble of the human ego is me, and I'm responsible for that. And everything outside the bubble is something else, and I'm not responsible for that. There isn't a single minute of our life where our life is not sustained by the breath, by a dance of poetic interconnectedness between an ecology that provides us the oxygen and the life, that gives us the freedom to continue our delusions, that the earth that produced that oxygen is somehow out there. It's a fantastical illusion that we've created. And it's a strange and often destructive dance we have with ourselves, with the larger reality, as we go to war with nature, as we go to war with other cultures and other peoples. The Arabs that were fighting using the technology of drone warfare to bomb weddings, to drop parcel bombs and cluster bombs on a variety of populations around the planet. The mathematics of the algorithms behind those drones originated in the Middle East and migrated west. The religions that we use as the basis to fight Islamic countries emerged out of Islamic countries in the figure of a person we call Jesus that has a dark skin and an Arab visage. That some of us in our bigotry feel afraid of. Jesus wasn't white. When we lose this perspective, we enter this strange paradox in which the nose is doing battle with the lips, in which the nose is doing battle with the ears. thinking somehow that if either one wins or loses, there's a winner. Cancer is a dynamic in which a rapidly organizing chaotic entity within a host body consumes the host. So the cancer cells say, I'm me, and I don't care about this host body, right? I'm going to rapidly grow, and cancer cells grow like mad. They grow so much faster than the other parts of the body, and it's like, I'm me, and I love it, and I'm going to grow here, and I'm going to reproduce here, and I'm going to have indiscriminate sex over here, and grow like this, and grow like this, and and then they kill the host body. It's like, oh dear, where do we get our food now? Doom. There's no time to think about that. They're dead. Cancer dies with the host body. Cancer suffers from the delusion that it is independent of the body it must consume in order to exist. And it's not a very long-lived delusion. When you kill the host body of which you are a part, be that the culture, the species, the planet, the known forces of the universe, you die with it. So we have this dynamic. And one of the phenomena of human beings is the dance between the comprehensive unity, this fact that the core level of physics, when you start observing and measuring, energy observed and measured in this way is a particle. Energy observed and measured in this way is a wave. You have this duality of yin and yang, masculine and feminine. So you have this unified energy, and then you start measuring and eating of that fruit. You find if you measure energy this way, it's a particle, and if you measure energy that way, it's a wave, but it can't be both. And so we bifurcate, we divide this integrated system into right and left, up and down, forward and back. And in doing so, we create language, we create distinction. Because when everything is one, you don't even have a word to say one. But as soon as you divide the whole in half, now you can, look, there's the right half and there's the left half. And as soon as you have the right half and the left half, you have choice. Well, grass is always greener on the other side. I want to be part of the left half. No, I want to be part of the right half. You know, it's back and forth. You have choice. But it's a certain kind of choice that exists within the framework of a consciousness that can divide up an interconnected system that is so interconnected. You realize in the entire history of the universe, energy has never been created or destroyed. It's just been migrated. Which means that if this one piece of chalk was poofed out of existence, and really the entire fabric, the entire mathematical equation of the multiverse would cease to exist. Because this is part of the equation. Because the equation wouldn't work. It wouldn't work without you. It wouldn't work without me. It wouldn't work without this piece of chalk. The entire equation would have to change for this energy to just vanish. Now, for this energy to migrate, easy. I can use this up, turning this energy into this energy. I can take a block and turn it into thousands of lines. But it's not destroyed. It's just moved from a block into thousands of lines. When you die, your body isn't destroyed. it's consumed, hopefully, in its natural rhythm, it's consumed by the environment around it. Worms go in and turn parts of your body into this other energy. And then worms turn decent soil into even better soil that's richer for plants. And then the plants grow, and then they don't vanish. They drop leaves that get consumed in the soil. It's all a dance of migrating energy. Nothing is created and destroyed at an energetic level. It's just given different forms. And we are the ones looking through the lens of the human ego that names those forms and says, this is a piece of chalk. And I like white chalk for drawing because of this. Why? Because it's better contrast on black. And what is contrast? Well, it's the extreme polarities of the thing I chop up into little bits. With this illusion of choice, with this illusion of distinction, with the technology of language, we can take the whole and we can start fabricating it into more and more bits. As Terence McKenna likes to say, we are a novelty-creating phenomena. Every time we create a new word, every time we create a new piece of art, every time we invent a pink iPhone and a black iPhone, we've added to the novelty of our world, the complexity, the distinctions. There's now a new form that didn't exist until that was migrated out of this energy into this energy. Billions of atoms were moved around from this and this and this to create the new pink. Oh, sure, pink existed before that, but not in this shape. Not in the 2009 model. It's a new form. We're the weavers of distinction, the inventors of novelty. And yet, we exist within a mathematical formula in which the sphere is the most elegant and sacred framework through which to view reality, through which to experience reality. The sphere, the symmetry. They do studies on attractiveness in human beings, and what they like is symmetry. You are deemed on a biological level to be more attractive than someone else who is less symmetrical. If you take your face and mirror it exactly, people will and create a montage image. People will find you more attractive. Because we know at a biological level that symmetry is linked to health, which is linked to wholeness. And we want, as a species, to grow. We want to move towards wholeness, towards health, towards a return at some level. In the descent into matter and the fight, flight, freeze, reptilian, give a shit about anyone else, I'm out for number one, crocodile brain. We grew to have emotions, and we grew to have thoughts, and we grew to become aware of those emotions and to relate to our thoughts and our feelings. And the pinnacle of human evolution, the pinnacle, has always been transcendent states of consciousness. The remembering of the framework of reality into healing the illusion of separation, the illusion of good and bad, the illusion of distinction. To find that numinous and luminous place where the sphere is an infinite number of lines and a wave simultaneously. You know, you take a circle, and I've refracted it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You take the circle and you refract it into 6 things. Our conscious brain is so small that that's a lot to grasp. Remembering a 20-digit number, it's tough. Our minds need a simple model of reality, or they get lost. That doesn't mean reality is simple. It simply means we need a simple model of reality to relate to the vastness of the complexity. And this ties into trauma again, because the reality is that 99% of all there is to know we don't know, and we don't even know that we don't know it. What's the distance between star X3c and star B28? One of billions of questions you have no idea. And that's an example of a question you know you don't know. One of billions of questions you know you don't know the answer to that. Now, sure, but that's something you can look up. You can spend $1 million if necessary and rent the telescopes and, okay, now I know, 2 years later, I know the distance between star B28 and Z69. It's 289.60 light years away. There, I know it. Okay, what about the other 10 billion stars you are not going to have time to explore? And that's just the stuff you know you don't know. What about what was your grandmother feeling in this state and this and that and the other? What about why did your partner suddenly go to sleep when... See, so much you don't even know you don't know. 50% of the sensory data coming into our brains, there's a governor, an acculturated area of the brain that governs and decides what is and isn't important. And that governor says that if anything is a potential threat and anomalous data, it's going to register 5 times bigger in the consciousness than anything that seems status quo. Which is why it's so hard to have successful relationships. Because everything your partner does wrong registers 5 times bigger than everything they do right. Well, heaven help the business that tries to be profitable and sustainable in that ratio. A client has to give you $5 in profit for every dollar in expense, or you go bankrupt. Most of the known businesses in the world would be bankrupt at that ratio, because very few of them make 500% profit per transaction. But that's what you've got to do in human relationships. You've got to make a 500% or more net profit just to break even. Because otherwise the brain of that person is telling them, this is dangerous, this is terrible. They left the toothpaste out? Wow. What next? They may not have done it, but I see them looking at my best friend. I know you want to fuck them. And you think that every so often. I can't have that. Get rid of you. It's like, screw the fact that you've never done it 99.999% of the time. Can't have it. 500% amplified negativity to survive. You see, because that worked. That ratio, 5-to-1, worked. Now, at a certain point, if it was 10-to-1, we wouldn't have a species. If it was 100-to-1, meaning someone had to do, 100 things right for every one thing they did wrong, or you want nothing to do with them, you couldn't find anyone who could live up to that standard, so there wouldn't be a species because you wouldn't want to mate with anyone, so you'd all die out busily avoiding people who were 99% beneficial and 1% toxic. So you die out in a generation. So it's this dance. That's what nature has found to be most sustainable. Moving through crocodile reptilian is this 5-to-1 ratio. And I get this from John Gottman, who talks about the ratio, is one of the few scientists in our culture to study relationship, who talks about the ratio of praise to criticism that a marriage can survive. And what he says is, he can do a 15-minute video and have a 90% success, ability to predict whether a couple will be married in a few years, whether they'll survive or not. And the ratio is 5-to-1 is the kind of the cutoff point. If they're giving each other 5 times more smiles, 5 times more affirmations, 5 times more build-up, 5 times more praise, then cut-downs, criticisms, etc., that's the pivot point. If they're doing just 3 times more positive stuff and, 3-to-1, on a business level, wow, 3-to-1? You make $3 for every dollar you spend out? Ooh, great business. Romantic relationship doesn't cut it. You need 5-to-1 as a starting point. And this ties into and we know this. Walk through a crowd, everyone says, oh, you look great, you look great, you look great. You catch this one little glimpse from some stranger like, wow, her hair looks weird. What? There's one person in the room who doesn't like my hair? What are we going to do about it? Is the world going to come to an end? The whole evening, the next day, did my hair look weird? What do you mean she's... we have 100-to-1 minds. 100 people thought it was fine, one person. Oh my goodness. This ties into this pattern of sensitivity. How sensitive are we to something? Well, it's, in a culture like ours, where one's entire self-worth as a female, courtesy of our many advertisers, is determined by hair color. Well, this is a traumatic event. Well, why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be a traumatic event? Because if your entire self-worth and cultural, is apparently, if you listen to any of the thousands of messages on TV, determined by your hair color, well, do you want your whole hair color to be on the line? Your entire worth to be on the line because it's beginning to spread. People aren't liking my hair. It's a big event. That's the job of our advertising companies, to get us to believe something that absurd so that we'll waste literally billions of dollars on toxic products that when it's all said and done, you've got the same thing. Some people like this color, some people like something else, some people like the idea of being a bit different and changing color, and some people like the traditional. So you haven't actually gotten anywhere. So on my coughing, I thought we should have a little drink. One of the great aspects of this technology that you and I didn't make, but that is gifted to us by our culture, by our species, is you can press pause at any point, just like me. It doesn't interrupt the flow too much, and bring your body in, because part of this thing that's very interesting about Western culture is, we really think this is where it's at. But there are other cultures that dance these truths. There are other cultures that celebrate these truths in art. There are other cultures that would never dream of sitting down and maintaining, a stable tone and doing this and, for hours just to process stuff in our minds. And sometimes our bodies rise up and say, let's move along. And when they do, if you look through the paradigm of wholeness, is this interaction engaging the heart or primarily the mind? Is it engaging the body or mostly the mind? You see, we are a profoundly asymmetrical culture. And it's why I want to explore chauvinism. Coming through the doorway of this cult being the root word of culture. See, the cult in culture is the part that is not rational. Culture is an evolutionary process. And usually there's at least some point when there's something rational about it. A meme spreads because it increases the effectiveness of the individual using the memes. In the evolutionary paradigm, things that are too inefficient stop existing. So we have this dynamic. We have this dynamic of culture. But we also have the cult in culture, these areas that may have made a little bit of sense at one point, but are completely absurd. And that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in the cult aspects, to pull the cult out of culture. And science is, at its core, the process of correlating a model of reality with reality. Now, culture is a model of reality. As an American male, I was told, be your own person, make your own money, start a business, spend lots of money, and you will be living the American dream and you will be happy. It's a model of reality. Now, it didn't work. One of the most miserable moments of my life was arriving at the dream. Had the house, had the job, had the savings, no debt. $250,000 in money on growth and therapies, and had the diet, vegetarian, organic. Did the workshops, had the time, read the books, had the car, had the sex. And it's like I've never been so miserable in my entire life. And the question is why? Why would I, as an American male, supposedly at the top of the power structure of our hierarchy of cultures, meaning many people around the world consider American capitalist democracy to be at the pinnacle of the thought hierarchies, of the meme hierarchies around the world. That's the hypothesis. And as an American man, I generate 102 tons of garbage in my lifetime. I generate 1,500 metric tons of CO2. I instigate 90,000 gallons of gasoline to be burned. And I have as many as 30,000 trace chemicals consumed and or in elements in my body as part of my lifestyle, which makes me, and I travel more. I've been around the globe, probably 20 times so far. So I travel more than almost any individual in our species' history. Now, there have been 10,000 cultures in our species' history. Dancing cultures, singing cultures, hunting cultures, goddess-worshipping cultures, cultures of great femininity that place the hearth and the home as the center of the culture, great constructionist cultures, highly engineered cultures such as our own, incredibly laid-back cultures, psychedelic cultures. There have been 10,000 languages in our human history, in our species history, 10 human languages, or 10,000. And with that, whole views of the world, born of a great snake standing on the top of a turtle, the river of life, the sun goddess and sun worships, the sun is a man, the sun is a woman, the astrological, the Greek mythologies. There have been 10,000 stories in our species history. And each one emphasizes a different thing, brings a certain part of our probability field into focus. But in all 10,000 cultures in human history, there has never been a culture as energy intensive as the culture in the United States. Meaning, we can go to tribal Amazon tomorrow and find tribes that will not leave 10 pounds of garbage at the end of their existence, that a human being will not even generate 10 pounds of garbage versus 102 tons. Do you know how big that is, 102 tons? That's a small high-rise of plastics and this and that and the other. 90,000 gallons of gasoline consumed, 1,500 metric tons of CO2, and those are just the simple things that we measure. Traveling the globe, this is an exponential explosion of energy consumption. Remember that cancer metaphor. An unattuned consumption of energy from the host body. Now, if we take the difference of 10 pounds of garbage and go to 102 tons of garbage, and we say, okay, we're consuming 1,000 times, let's just call it 1,000, right? And maybe 100,000 more in some cases, but let's just call it 1,000. If we say we're consuming 1,000 times more energy than most of the cultures in human history, in most of the cultures around the planet, be they Eskimos or this, that, and the other, of our indigenous ancestors. And, if you look at the billions of years of history, we're just this tiny little blip. It's like, wow, we've just been doing this for a couple hundred years. The definition of intelligence is the efficient transformation of one form of energy into another energy to facilitate well-being. So, you know, things can't be created and destroyed on an energetic level. But if I dig a big hole in the ground, I'm moving that energy from the earth to one thing, and I drill down, I'm turning energy, and I'm finding oil, and I'm pulling it up, and then I'm burning oil. I'm going through this transformation process of taking one form of natural resource and turning it into thousands of other forms. And this is consuming and transforming energy. Now, if we look at this on an economic model, and we do that simply because we are a money-worshipping culture, we are a culture that will do a phenomenal amount of rational and irrational things for money. And because of this, it helps us see things more clearly, because we don't pay people to think in our culture. We don't pay people to develop cosmologies, which is why I won't make a dime from any of this, and I can go out and consume things or make things in our culture and get paid tens of thousands of dollars. So we love our money, and we pay for things. That's why we consume so many things. Now, if you were to be told that you could spend $1 for an iPhone, or you could spend $10 for the exact same iPhone, it's like, here's an iPhone. You can either pay $1 or you can pay $10. We leap on the foolishness of the person who would pay $10 in a capitalistic, reductionistic, materialistic paradigm. You fool, I got it for this amount. What? You got that deal? And that's not even when we're talking 10 to 1. You got 5% off and spent 2 hours shopping online to get the little thing. So this is an example of intelligence. You value money. You value the iPhone. So if you can give less for more, you're smart within our culture. Now, if you look at something, an iPhone is a symbol of well-being, and it's a dubious one looking at the studies, meaning we're dealing with chronic anxiety, depression, etc., and it seems to correlate with the explosion of Facebook use, which wouldn't occur if you didn't have the iPhone. And frankly, it's not really the phone that you're buying. They've had phones forever, and frankly, having a little piece, to be able to pick up a phone and go off into Wonderland and walk on the beach without being distracted is, an asset, not a liability. So, money is a symbol of well-being. It's just paper. It's just numbers. Nobody would carry around bits of paper in stacks if they could put it down and just walk around and enjoy life. No, it's a symbol of value. It's part of a promise that says you've got to do anything you possibly can to make these bits of paper. Why? Well, you got to. What's the point? Well, you can then take these bits of paper and you can buy iPhones. Why? What's the point? Oh, silly. Then you'll look cool and important and, be able to do this and do that and do this and do that. And why? Because if you look cool and important, people will like you and you'll be popular. Well, why? Well, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have survival, you have security of survival, meaning as soon as you've reached that point on the hierarchy where you feel like, okay, I can keep my body alive. Oh, good. Had to steal, had to lie, had to do this, had to pretend that I agreed with that person's political views so they wouldn't fire me, but I've survived. It's like, will I survive tomorrow? There might be layoffs. Is that person, I know they're having an affair with so-and-so thing. It's going to be them or me, right? I should probably just upload a photo of that person with the boss's wife, so that then they'll get fired and I'll have my job for another day. I'll survive. I'll be secure in my survival. It's them or me. It's them or me. I've got a scarcity fear. When you start off in the reptilian brainstem, and this is one of the big distinctions on a cultural level between, for example, Denmark and the United States. Denmark is a socialist democracy. It is a socialist capitalist democracy. So they pay Danish people to go to college. I met a Danish person in Thailand recently and I asked, how's it going in Copenhagen? Because I was just so impressed after interviewing 100 Danes. No, it was 30 Danes I interviewed. After interviewing 30 Danes, and they all loved their country. They were all employed. They all doing jobs they liked. It's amazing. And I asked, how's it going? And they said, it's not too bad. Recently, our government reduced the allowance they give every young Danish person to go to college. So it's free college plus you get $1,000 a month basically to go to college. And so surprise, surprise, every single person I met and talked to and know about in Denmark has a college degree. And they're doing it because there's no student debt and all that to study things that they love. And lo and behold, after studying things that they love, they want to go out and do work in those fields that they love. And lo and behold, when they do jobs that they love and have prepared for and can do competently, they enjoy those jobs, and so they keep doing them. And so even though they could stop working and get just about the same amount of money, they don't feel like it. They don't feel like stopping working because it's more fun to do something that they've studied for and they love. And so we have this model, going back to simple models of reality, in the United States that says that, I'm just going to pause here. Transferring the power cord from camera 1 to camera 2. So we have this paradigm in the United States that says people are lazy, people will use the system, they'll take advantage of me, they're bad, I'm bad, you're bad, can't give people half a chance, they'll do this. But one of the reasons that's the case is because we induce the culture into the reptilian brainstem. And we do it by that aversion of that Hollywood reality, where you've got, in Hollywood, you've got a 1% chance of making it. Maybe it's a 0.1%. Maybe 1 in 1,000 becomes a big star. And that's pushing it. You think of how many millions of people go to Hollywood at one point or another trying to make it. And can we name more than 100 stars that, it's like, yeah, they're the big stars? 1 million, 100 make it, or 10 make it. I can't think of 100, but 10, they're making it. So within a culture that says that a majority of people are not going to make it, a majority of people are not going to end up in jobs they love, doing things they love, debt-free, having their own house and space, in a good relationship with people they like, a majority of people are going to fail. And what are we going to do with them when they fail? We're going to punch them and say, you're a loser. We want nothing to do with you because you failed. This triggers the reptilian brain. Fight, flight, freeze. I've got to be one of those people that win. So you have this frenetic, fear-based activity. I've got to look good. I've got to do this. Oh, so exhausting. Oh gosh, I have to doctor that photo. So-and-so's getting ahead of me in Facebook. They went to Hawaii. And, oh gosh, come on, we got to go to Fiji. When you create a framework that is sociopathic, you trigger the sociopathic brain, you consider the competitiveness, and so we frenetically work, even when we're depressed. We're depressed in America because it's depressing to be tossed out in your ear as a loser if you fail. It's depressing. It's lonely. It's sad. Oh, gosh. It's like, oh, my God. Their best friend? It's so miserable. In Denmark, they do things a little differently. We care about you as human beings. We're going to give you a college education. Free health care. That's not free, of course. We're happy to pay 80% of our money in taxes. And that was the big surprise for me as an American business person. I interviewed all 30 Danes and I said, how do you feel about the 30% taxes? How do you feel? And they said, great, no problem. I didn't find 1 in 30 that complained about 80% taxes. And after 2 weeks in exploring Copenhagen and looking at the design architecture, I understood why. Because I understood that I pay 50% taxes. Meaning if you track all of the money, a result correlated to my lifestyle that ends up in the hands of the U.S. government in one form or the other local, state, this and that, the other, it's 50%. So I pay 50% of all money to one agency or another. And they pay 80%. So there's a 30% premium for a 400 to 500% higher quality of life. A higher quality of life that says I will never see one of my friends on the street. I will never be in the awkward situation of having to bail someone out of debt or dissociate them as a friend because the friendship can't survive them going through all kinds of hell while I don't, and me not doing anything about that. Because to the person going through all kinds of hell, that feels sociopathic, and to me, I feel guilty. So generally what Americans do when people are going through hard times, it's like, do you hear what's going through so-and-so? Yeah, I don't want to return their calls. They're losers. No, we're the winners over here, right? It's miserable. And people know it. They know why you're not returning their calls. It's like, I'm hurting, I'm needing help, therefore people are not helping me. Because they don't want to feel guilty and they don't want to waste their time because they're busy winning the race, right? Because if they win the race, we have a list of the most wealthy people. We don't have a list of the kind people, of the intelligent people. Why would we want a Fortune 500 list of the most productive parents in the country? Like parenting? Who gives a shit about that? Why would we want to know nationally in our magazines the top 100 teachers of the year based on student love? How much they love their teacher and study learning. Why would we want to publish and know about the most kind Americans in the century? Kind? Give me a break. The world is dog eat dog because we make it that way, right? You see, in Denmark, they don't do it. So they're happier by a huge margin. That 30% premium, free health care, amazing parks, sustainable energy, low trauma, 100% college education, safety net, retirement, housing if necessary. The architectural quality of life is fabulous. Lanes for bicycles. I could not ask for a more relaxed, happy people in a Western culture where the visual, sound, and logistical environment was superior to anything I've ever seen in the United States. I'd pay a 30% premium for that in a heartbeat, and so would they. It's very fascinating. So what Denmark does is it takes care of survival and security for all of its people. Just that's not in question. If you are born in Denmark, you will survive. You will be secure in your survival, 2 of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And because of that, and because we don't measure people based on if you're surviving or not, that's a loser, they don't have a house, that's a winner, they have a house, everyone has a house. So how are you going to measure who's a winner? Well, it's of course social skills. This is a friendly, honest, hardworking person who does the thing they love to do well. Oh, I like them. So then it becomes a character-based culture rather than a material-based culture. This is huge. It's huge. And this is part of that top-down dynamic. Because when I went to Copenhagen, the thing that stunned me as someone who's lived with low-grade anxiety about the sociopathic nature of my cult my entire life, is for the first time I was dealing with people who did not have an undercurrent of fear because they had nothing to be afraid of. It wasn't because they were being positive about a sociopathic culture. See, I'd learned all about having a positive attitude in my New Age group and all that. They didn't need to be positive. They had a positive culture to be positive about. They didn't have to say, gee, I could be on the street tomorrow, but let's not think about that. Let's be positive. Because they wouldn't be on the street tomorrow. Because they'd made a deal with themselves that said no one in our country is going to be on the street. Everyone in our country is going to be educated. There's not going to be any laughing stock in our culture. Oh, those idiots, those uninformed Southerners, those We're not going to do that to our people. We're going to give our people the very best chance with good health, with good education, with a home, with retraining projects that if you decide you don't like your particular job, well, you stop working, your income continues. You find a job you really like and you continue there because it's more fun to contribute to the society. And what Maslow said is that once you meet your need for love and belonging, you need to meet your need for self-esteem, to like yourself. You see, and one of the qualities of self-esteem is you don't hurt other people intentionally. You don't hurt other people intentionally. Otherwise, you don't feel good about yourself. And we have a need to have a sense of self-esteem. As soon as our need for self-esteem is met, we have a need to self-actualize, to further develop ourselves, to bring our unique talents to the world, and to create our dreams. And as soon as that need is met, we have a need for transcendence, to be of service to the country. We move into that domain. I believe it's in the pineal gland, where we have endogenous DMT, a Schedule I drug in America. One of the jokes I thought was rather funny is, Republicans hate psychedelics. Republicans have always and will always hate psychedelics and seek to attack anyone that explores consciousness. Because no one in the history of humanity has ever expanded consciousness, has ever taken psychedelics and decided we need more wars. We need more, we need to neglect more of our homeless. In other words, no one votes more Republican because they take psychedelics. So it's a dangerous combination for Republicans. If you want to grow your tribe, and everyone who smokes a little this or a little that questions some of the dogmas, like, are people really that bad? Are people that, oh yes they are, we've got to be tough on crime, and nobody seems to want to lock more people up after taking psychedelics. So I know Richard Nixon, with his aide, when this was blossoming with Vietnam, they got together, and the aide has come forth now. It's obviously been a while. The aide that had the brainstorming session with Nixon has come forth. And he said, we couldn't arrest them for being black. We couldn't arrest them for being feminist. We couldn't arrest them for protesting an obscene and absurd war. So here's what we did. We doctored the science. We overlooked scientists, meaning scientists have come forth and acknowledged that they've lied about the danger of psychedelics, which have been used for thousands of years. So we doctored the science by paying scientists to come up with false study, give monkeys poison and say it was, this psychedelic or that psychedelic. So we doctored the science, we suppressed the science, we humiliated and refused government funding to science. Then we scheduled the drugs as Schedule 1 with no benefit for all one reason. What we wanted to do at the end of this was we knew that these drugs were commonly used amongst our political enemies. That the people who were anti-war in the 60s and 70s were the kind of people that would try LSD, that would try a little peyote, that might consume ayahuasca, that would smoke a little weed. And what we wanted to do was decimate our political enemies. So we made all of these harmless drugs Schedule 1, stopped an entire arena of scientific research for 40 years, turned the public against it using children as bait, and then started harassing and terrifying our political opponents, seizing and arresting them on the basis of drug use, a trumped-up charge that we knew would work to help this faction of our to help us damage this faction of our political enemies that we could not get to on legitimate means. Now, the millions of Americans who have died and lost their lives, who have been shamed, who have been imprisoned, whose families have been decimated, the millions of children who have grown up without a father, the backward slide in racism. When you have more trauma and you have more pain, you have more drug use, which means that the minorities that experience the most trauma and pain in a racist culture as is our own, that includes African Americans, will be disproportionately targeted. This is a sociopathic culture when you realize that one man, the king, the president, whose responsibility is to uphold the law and serve the American people, as an abused child, Nixon learned that he had no value as an abused child. He learned that his feelings would get him humiliated and shamed at school and at home. He learned that his tears were not anything anyone was interested in. He learned that the truth didn't matter all that much. that one thing mattered: power, money, fame, social ranking in a materialist culture. And who's at the top of that role? The President of the United States. And having experienced the trauma, the grief, the indignity, the helplessness of being raised and abused young man in America, in which his feminine side was decimated since birth, he had one goal: to get that power and stay there. And if millions of Americans have to die, in order that he can get a few points of political one-upmanship, so be it, because that's the sociopathic brain. The sociopathic brain doesn't have the capacity to empathize. It has the capacity to analyze, fight, flight, or freeze. And Nixon chose to fight those seeking more compassion, to fight those seeking to grow consciousness, to fight those that wanted more equality that just happened to be on the other side of the political divide from Nixon. So Nixon went to war with America by going to war indiscriminately with his political enemies. And millions upon millions of lives from that one betrayal have been downgraded anywhere from 30% of what they could have been to hundreds of percent to what they could have been, to millions dead. When you play with influence, when you play with your authority in that way, to stabilize your power base at the expense of the people you are responsible, you have sworn an oath to serve and protect, you commit great evil. You destroy that which your role demands that you uphold. And we're touching on veins of chauvinism. We're touching on veins of chauvinism. Because chauvinism is not the valuing, well, it can be, but chauvinism is not the valuing of men more than women. There's been some interesting studies that actually show that women, in many cases, are outperforming men at the present time. And that, the statistical wage gap. For example, if you look at high-risk jobs on oil rigs, they are dominated by men because women either don't have the body for them or don't want to have a high-risk, isolated job and make that more money. If you look at the dynamic in business, where many men work 60 to 100-hour weeks and don't have a life and climb to the top of scalable companies. For example, Jobs climbed to the top of Apple. That's a scalable company, meaning he's selling millions of iPads and he's getting a small bit of every one, and that's reflected in his salary. So a lot of people are getting, but women tend to migrate to people-oriented positions, like nursing. So a woman would rather be a nurse than as a statistic. A woman enjoys being a nurse more than being a coder as a statistic. It's a little bit closer to her priority, and we can see this in the studies of Nordic countries. Iceland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. They have done more in the last 30 years than any other country in the world to try and make a balance of men and women, to make sure that every woman has equal rights. And what's happened with that equal framework is the exaggeration. Women have chosen careers that connect them with people because they enjoy them more. But people don't scale. You see, if you're watching a baby, you can't get the model right and then export it and watch 1,000 babies. You can watch a baby. It doesn't scale. But if you get an iPhone recipe right and you're the winner and people decide to buy your iPhone rather than the Huawei's and the Samsungs and and you sell 10 million iPhones, the company is willing to give you a $10 million salary at $1 profit per iPhone. You get $1 of that $1,000 for that CEO that made and scaled that iPhone, because there's more to go around, because it's scalable. People jobs don't scale well. But women don't apply for the oil rig jobs. Women generally would rather have a life. Good on them. In other words, there's nothing wrong with it. The only thing, we're looking through this model that the important people make the most money, as opposed to the important people bring well-being to their people. Because we're dealing with this underlying view of chauvinism, in which material things are more important than character traits, in which the outer world is more important than the inner world, women have the perception, and men have the perception in our culture, that women are lower ranking than men because they're working with people and inner things more than men are, and in the process of a less scalable industry are making less money than men. And we look at jobs that died of cancer, that had very difficult social life, who was a bit of an asshole, a bit of a sociopath, who couldn't, treat his own daughter well, who worked 60 to 80-hour weeks, who was obsessive, who had tirades and rages. And we think somehow that because he was head of Apple, he's more important than a nurse who's helping terrified trauma survivors come back and feel welcome and that they belong in the cult. Now, why do you think that? It's not rational. There's nothing innate about that logic. You think it from the cues. That nurse is not on the cover of Time magazine. Why not? Because you don't think that's worth being on the cover of Time magazine. Otherwise, it would be on the cover, because people buy the magazines. And magazines are not any more trendsetters. Magazines do studies. They try and make money. How do they make money? By selling more issues. So they make up 10 copies and bring in their focus groups, and they learn. Nobody buys the cover, Nurse of the Year. I don't want to hear about Nurse of the Year. Okay, you don't want to hear. So they won't make any money selling Nurse of the Year. That's you, the women included, that won't buy it. So when you have a deep chauvinistic underpinning within the culture, you're raised within that culture to believe that masculinity as a man or as a woman. You see, Margaret Thatcher rose to the head of England. She's one of the most masculine human beings in England. Stubborn, sociopathic, driven by numbers, completely unemotional, strategic, commanding her persona, all about image. This is who I am, this is the way it's going to be, certainty, getting to the point, decimating her opponents. So she got to be the head of England. I can be more masculine than any of the men here. So you look at Clinton, almost got to the top. Hillary. Sociopathic, manipulative, calculating, unempathic. One of the most masculine presences. You could even say she's more masculine than Trump. Because he does what he feels. And she follows the line that she thinks is going to get her elected. She controls her body. She controls so much of what she does. Trump just wakes up, I feel like this. This should be the way reality works, so here I am. He's more emotional, more spontaneous. He's more feminine in that domain than Hillary. This element of chauvinism is not about gender, it's about traits. In the circular way that I'm getting and presenting this, it's feminine. Many people will disvote this because it takes a while and because there's not just one point. When you reveal a pattern, it's looking at ecological thinking. That's feminine thinking. How are things connected? That's feminine thinking, ecological thinking. Masculine thinking is isolated and to the point thinking. I have this point. Here's my point. I'm going to make this point. This is the point, and this is the point that I just made, and I'm going to do it in a succinct, pithy soundbite, and that is a little bit of masculine propaganda. That's my point. I'm standing by it. This is my point. And when you start talking, what's your point? What's your point? What's your point? What's your pattern? What's your pattern? What's your pattern? The point exists within a pattern. No, get to the point. No, get to the pattern. Masculine and feminine. Structure is masculine. Flow is feminine. The destination is the point. The journey is the circle. We live in a culture that in the heart-mind-body triad is dominated by the mind and the body. The most feminine part of the triad is the heart. How do you feel? And how much do those feelings connect with your body? The feminine part is the emotion that takes place within the framework of your rhythm, your routine, and your thoughts. These elicit emotional responses that in turn can give feedback about the quality of the container and the structure. When you sit down in an uncomfortable chair and your body feels pain and pushed out of whack, and then you feel sad, or you feel irritated. That feedback goes back to guide the manufacturing process of a more comfortable chair. Or, in the case of our military, to shame and call you a pussy. This doesn't feel very nice. Feeling nice is for pussies. You think this is about feeling nice? Take that. Go clean the barracks out. I don't give a shit. It's not about this. It's not about that. I'm going to discipline you to dissociate from your feelings. Because if we don't succeed at that, you're not going to enjoy killing people. You're never going to be elevated to the point where those copters in the WikiLeaks video are mowing down innocents, including Reuters, as if it's a video game. Because if we acknowledge that that's part of who we are, that's not going to be very much fun. It's going to create friction in the oiled sociopathic machine that is warfare. So, I want to briefly talk about how when the whole is broken into polarity, we are in a polarized world. Physical reality is a duality or a triality. We don't experience it as one. Electricity flows with a positive and negative pole. There's black and there's white and there's the colors in between. So we're a duality. And the core duality is the break of the whole down into yin and to yang, masculine and feminine, positive and negative, black and white, duality. Every culture has related to a part of that duality differently. Now, Western culture has sided heavily with the masculine, good against evil, white against black, higher against lower, more versus less, bigger is better. And if we break human interaction, into duality, this is an interaction right here. So how can we break this interaction? Well, in this moment, I'm talking, and if communication is occurring, you're listening. If communication isn't occurring, you're busy talking in your own mind and blocking out everything that I'm saying, and communication is not occurring. Communication occurs when someone speaks and someone listens. If someone listens and no one speaks, there's no communication. If someone speaks and no one listens, there's no communication. If both people don't speak, there's no communication. If both people speak, there's no communication. The only way communication occurs is if someone speaks and someone listens. Now that speaking can be visual, facial, that's speaking. That's telling you statistically that things are going on. Now it's not always accurate speaking, you have a model for that. If I squint like this, you will be accurate in saying that I'm feeling more defended than if I'm like this. That'll be an accurate model. It's not reality, meaning some people squint because they have a physical muscle twitch or the light is too bright in their eyes and it's hurting their eyes. And they're not defensive at all against you, but the light is shining in their face and they're going like that and you're hearing it as them squinting. But statistically, your model is correct. If I'm squinting like this, there's a much higher probability that I'm defending myself against you. And if I go like this, it's almost certain because, light doesn't affect fist. If I talk like this, you're not going to... Then if I add in the words, it fits. It becomes an error. You're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to get you. Go away, Well, it's pretty hard to say that has nothing to do with defensiveness, but, just the squint bit is just a probability field. And you look at these, when you're looking at a pattern, you're looking at multiple sources of data and how they all converge into one area. And in this case, the core pattern behind all of this is the pattern of chauvinism. Now, what is chauvinism? It is the valuing, the innate valuing. In the case of male or masculine chauvinism, the innate valuing of masculine energy more than feminine energy. Now, what's the difference between innate valuing and rational valuing? I mean, if I look at a scale and I place this crystal here, there's a number of things going on. First of all, I feel a wonderful feeling right here because of this crystal. And I could just pause, like this would be a break with American etiquette, but if I just pause and say, fuck all this, wow. That's a great feeling. In fact, let me just switch topics right now. In fact, let me just stop talking. And I invite you to touch in with this feeling. It's a beautiful feeling. There's beauty. Bring it here. Releasing. Now the question is, are you happier having watched that than what I was going to say? I am. Everything that just happened there was feminine. Slowing down. Enjoying the circle. Shifting energy focus. Wider beam lens. Avoiding the rush to get to the destination. Focusing on feelings. Focusing on the ineffable, that which is not structured, because I don't know why. That wasn't planned, masculine. It wasn't focused. It was releasing the focus. It was saying, forget about my point. Forget about the dogma of the speaker listening contract. The dogma that says I'm supposed to stay on topic and lead you directly to where you're supposed to go in an intelligent, succinct way that your mind says that's the way speakers behave. But that wasn't how I behaved, was it? I was saying, wow, this feeling is interesting. I like it. Makes me happy. I haven't felt very happy in this whole conversation. Wow, this is important. I released structure, created more flow, had more energy. Now, this is the kind of thing we don't do in America with any respect. Oh, we call these people woo-woo people. We do this. We do all... I mean, what kind of a name is that? You're scientific and you say it's woo-woo? You use a name that doesn't even exist in the dictionary? That's your science for describing unscientific people? It's a very bizarre thing, but it's getting to this deeper level of chauvinism, in which something that can't be named is not as valuable as something that can be named, because the name is the structure. It's an experience that can't be described is not as valuable as something that can be described, because describing it is the structure. And the structure is masculine, the experience is feminine. It's focusing on thoughts and ideas because the thoughts and ideas are masculine, the emotions are feminine. It's talking faster. They show that the audience has more confidence in America in the presenters who talk quickly rather than the presenters that talk slowly. Now, talking slowly gives the body time to catch up, gives you time to move into the shape of the sounds. Now, this is way more fun than anything that would make it on high-ranking TV as a presentation. And if you have any intelligence, you'll start moving your body and exploring and going into this wave. And you will venture off of your cultural map into denigrated realms of superstition, ignorance, feminism, women. Who can understand them? You will enter the realms of the culturally marginalized as you move towards balance and symmetry and intelligence. Because intelligence, let's look at battery design. You got a battery. Now, if you're a battery designer, your job in America is to make as much money for your battery company as you possibly can. Your value is determined by how much money you make for the company. So make a lot of money for us, you fucking son of a bitch. Get to work. Work those hours. Just keep going. We need that money. If you're a battery designer, you do 50% negative charge, 50% positive charge, and you carefully orchestrate that so that the battery lasts as long as possible per unit of energy invested in manufacturing the battery. You will get fired in a heartbeat if you produce a battery that has 20% negative charge and 80% positive charge, because it doesn't work. Because it wastes energy, because it is an absurdly stupid and ignorant way to design a battery. But you turn around and become a cultural designer, and you will be elevated to the highest stature and rank within that culture for designing a culture and an individual that leans 80% to the masculine and 20% to the feminine. Because culture is not scientific. It is not objective, and it is not rational. It is cult-like. And cult-like means that you do it because other people are doing it. And you value it because other people value it. That's what makes it a cult. Would any of you, I don't know if you heard about the $50 million painting that was all yellow? Stunning, right? The epitome of modern art. Studied it this school, studied at that school, the tortured artist. Finally, in the peak of his career, gets out a quart of yellow paint, a little bit of white there. Let's see, do we want any other color? No. Gee, that bit of yellow isn't quite like this bit of yellow. Let's paint it a little bit more there. I will not be satisfied until every square millimeter of this canvas is yellow. And not only yellow, but just like every other bit of yellow. I will not be satisfied until every one of my fields is covered in corn, and not just any corn, but this kind of Monsanto-derived, genetically modified corn, all sprayed with the same Roundup. I want it all the same. Everything. Okay.